Hello.
Hey Mike, how's it going?
Not so bad. How the devil are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm glad we've been able to get here because my mic decided to go kaput just before I was about to call.
Always the case.
Yeah, exactly. I thought it would be Skype, but no, it was my actual microphone this time.
Oh dear, I hope it's nothing too expensive.
No, we're all right. It was a simple setting, just hiding away somewhere, as it always is.
Oh, that's good.
So how's everything going today then, man?
Not so bad, not so bad. Been busy. Week off work, so...
Yeah, that's good.
Painting fences and things.
And it seems like you've been busy with the old video game music stuff as well, because when we last spoke, we were talking about a lot of your stuff with Commodore 64 sounds and Amiga sounds, and now I'm hearing a lot of stuff like out of the ZX Spectrum and Atari ST and things like that, so it sounds like you're really expanding.
Yeah, I got to the point where I've always wanted to work on the Commodore 64. It's always been one of the machines that I particularly loved. The Amiga I worked on quite a lot back in the 90s, but I've been trying to sort of spread my wings a little bit and try some different things. So I've been working on all kinds of different systems over the last 5 months. Crikey, nearly 6 months. The year fly by.
Yeah, and you've been working on a lot of different projects as well, like and like kind of game jams and things like that, if I'm not wrong, like these kind of timed things where you've got like a time limit. Yeah,
well, I met a programmer. He's not so much a programmer, a graphics guy. He's on Twitter, Help Computer Zero. And we started working on a Commodore 64 game together with a programmer. And it kind of got to the point that these projects often do, where it's not really going very far. But he also does graphics as kind of proof of concept, that kind of thing, and puts them together into these game jams. So we worked together just on a daft little kind of game where you played tennis with a chicken. So I ended up doing basically it's a SID style tune. It was done with 2 SID chips and then recorded on proper equipment to go into this. So yeah, that was my first kind of non-native hardware thing that I've done in forever.
Right, and it's really cool to hear you branching out into these different things, like, because I remember you talking about in the last interview, like, your love for the Commodore 64 sounds and everything, and how much you were actually recording that stuff to tape, and I love those stories and things like that. But then, how much were the Atari and the ZX Spectrum and things like that a part of your upbringing as well?
Very little, if I'm honest. I mean, the ZX Spectrum, I was aware of it at the time, but never had one, never played with one, never touched one up until kind of Christmas last year when I bought myself one as an experiment. The Atari I had a little bit more experience with because before I got into the Amiga, kind of 1990, 1991, one of my best friends at school had an Atari ST. That was the 16-bit machine of choice for him. And so I played quite a lot of games onto there before I actually got an Amiga, so I kind of got some familiarity with that machine, just kind of playing games on it and stuff when I was a kid.
And what exactly is the Atari ST kind of chip setup? Because I've done a quick bit of research, but one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you today is because some of this stuff is a big blind spot for me. So I thought you could help kind of fill that in on the sound test. Now, I'm aware that the Atari ST is just like 2 channels of audio, right?
3. I'm not the world expert on this, so if I get anything wrong, I'm sure that your listeners will correct me. But basically, there's a very common 8-bit sound chip called the AY38910, which you found in Amstrads. It was the MSX standard chip, and it was in the later Spectrum, the 1-to-8 Spectrums. And the Atari used a Yamaha YM something or other, I forget the name of it. But essentially, it's the same chip that was in the Spectrums and so on. And what you've got with that is you've got 3 channels of sound. You've got square waves only,
right,
SID that's got square, triangle, sawtooth. And you've got a noise generator that it still generates a square wave, but it generates a kind of a random square wave to create noise. So that's basically the setup that you've got in there. You've got one shared ADSR, attack, decay, sustain, release envelope, which I don't think anybody actually ever used because it's easier to do it in software because you've got to share that across all 3 channels, unlike SID, which has got it on separate channels. So on the one hand, it's kind of a very, very simplistic, and you're right, for a machine like the Atari ST, you can play 3 independent channels of sound, but it's 3 independent channels of bleepy chip sound, unlike the Amiga that had a PCM sample playing chip. But yeah, that's what was in that, which is the reason why I think it was used in music, but it was used as a MIDI controller rather than for its own native sounds.
Right. So even though the Commodore 64 commonly used 3 channels, even though it could like squeeze a fourth as well out of it if it wanted to. So the key difference then is the limited waveforms that could be used on the AY chip then. So there's obviously a lot more available on the SID chip.
Yeah, that's the difference that I found. I mean, with the SID chip, the fourth channel was a ghost channel. It was created by mucking about with the volume registers. So it was kind of a programming feat by exploiting what you've undocumented, which was a bug in the original chip that allowed you to get that fourth channel out of it. So, and that kind of speaks to the way that the C64 is, because the chip was really powerful, but the actual C64 itself, the coders were so creative trying to squeeze the last kind of drops out of that system that they did these amazing sort of things with it. So with SID, you've got 4 different waveforms to choose from. 3 usable ones. One of them's noise. You've got this great ADSR envelope system. You've got wonderful kind of ability to shift the wavelength of your pulse waves and create these fantastic effects. A really strong filter that can be used. So it's got all these kind of really cool features. When you go to the AY chip, start working on the Spectrum or the ST, all that's gone. So in a way, it forces you to focus on the composition side of things. And the other side of it, you've got to be really creative to actually create sounds that you would create very easily on a SID chip. Even things like drum sounds and stuff is far more difficult to create on the AY chip. I've got so much respect for the guys that manage to make these things sound as great as they do, because it really is a challenge.
Absolutely. And we've got one of the tracks that you sent me from the Atari ST, or written for the Atari ST, from Hired Sword 2. And I wanted to ask about that actually, because I did some research on this, and it seems to majority be a C64 game. So have you just kind of like written this on the side for fun, or is there an Atari ST version?
There's it's work in progress. I'm not sure if I'm actually allowed to talk about it or not, but I'm hoping that nobody's going to grasp me up to the publisher.
Oh, fair enough.
There's an Atari ST port under consideration, and so as soon as I heard that Atari ST was a potential, I started digging about and trying to learn how to write for the machine. And these were relatively straightforward, because it's all really basic sounds in the C64 one. So I was limited to, I think I had 2K to do all the sounds for the entire game, which is not a great deal. So it's all very sound and simplistic stuff. It's all 2-channel stuff. And so it was kind of relatively easy to transfer to the ST as a way for me to learn how to use it and learn how to make sounds come out of the YM chip.
Mm-hmm. And it's hard enough to do many of this stuff on its own. And you mentioned earlier about the game jams thing and having this strict time limit a lot when you're just playing around with some of these new games. So how is it to work under such kind of pressure with such a strict time limit? And do you find that it has any particular effect on your composition?
Yeah, for me it works really well, because the way that I work is I don't ever prepare. I'm a kind of play it by ear kind of guy. So I tend to, if I'm writing a song for a band, I'd sit with a guitar and jam stuff until music came out. Got stuff sort of swimming about in my head that kind of has to come out again. The reason that I do these kind of game jams, the reason that I often stream my work on Twitch, is that it adds that kind of pressure, that kind of pressure of a deadline, if you like, that you've got to do something. And when I do that, I become more creative. It focuses me, it allows me to, get ideas out a little bit quicker. And I think the other thing is the biggest danger that you have when you're any of the creative arts is you never know when to stop. So, if you're drawing a picture, if you're making a game, if you're writing a piece of music, you'll tinker about around the edges of it for days and days and weeks and months. The vast, vast majority of my songs are written kind of in my head over a period of time beforehand, but then they're transcribed into the computer and finish, usually within a couple of hours. I don't tend to allow it any longer than that, because for me, once you've got past that stage, you kind of lose the gem of the idea and you start to over polish it. Yeah. And I really like that rough around the edges sort of thing.
And you mentioned these streams, which is a really cool thing that you've been doing, where you've actually been streaming yourself, composing and messing around with the different chip sounds. And where could my listeners find that, in case they don't know that this is going on? Because I know it's on Twitch, but is it Mike Richmond or Richmond Mike? I'm not sure.
It's off my head. Yeah, it's at twitch.tv/Richmond Mike. I've not done one for a couple of weeks just because I've not had a project on, and I've not particularly felt inspired by anything.
Yeah, it's not been a very inspiring time at the moment, is it?
It's not, but if somebody got in touch with me now and said, I've got a little project for you to do, I'd probably be on Sunday doing the music for it. So I've got a few things that I've got coming up, but until they get to a certain stage, it's not really the time. But once I actually start working on stuff, that's when I'll jump onto Twitch and do it. But I tend to sort of, in one session, write, create, finish, and often integrate into the game the sounds.
Right. And how much might like the live community in that chat, in the chat on Twitch on the side, actually might influence things? Like, I don't know whether they might be making suggestions or, I don't know, encouraging you in certain directions along the way. It
depends who's on there. I mean, it all depends. If there's a decent group of people on there and the chat starts going, yeah, definitely I'll engage. They're more than welcome to chip in, come up with ideas, tell me what sounds good, what sounds bad. And I will often kind of ask for that. A lot of the time, because I tend to kind of spontaneously sort of jump on and start working, I've maybe only got 2 or 3 people watching. So that's not something that sort of inspires a great deal of listener input.
I know what you mean.
When I've had kind of 50, 60 people on there, and there's 10 or 15 of them chatting at once, yeah, definitely it starts to be inspirational. Because even just little things like, does this sound crap? And somebody sort of says, yeah, or no, that's really good, or do a bit more like that. It does kind of lead you down the line in the same way that if you were jamming with a group of people in a room, you kind of feed off each other, don't you? And
yeah.
I'd love to be able to do that. I know that it's difficult, if not impossible, because of lag and so on. But it'd be absolutely great if you could actually jam with other musicians online, particularly in this kind of current climate.
I swear, there's got to be some technology coming down the line. There's got to be some clever thing where they can figure out latency or something eventually.
Yeah, there's got to be. I mean, the way that I imagine that you can do it, you can play to a click and you can both be delayed by longer than the longest lag, which is, I think, how they intended to try and do it on Live Aid, but it was just too difficult because the idea was Phil Collins was going to go on Concorde across to America and then play along with, I think, Paul McCartney in the UK. That technically didn't work, and nobody's actually tried to do it since, so there must be some kind of difficulty. But yeah, you're right, there must be something that you can do. Jamming, I think, will be the difficult bit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Playing an established song. Yeah, definitely. I'm sure it can be done.
Yeah. That's a lot easier. But one of the cool things about these streams that I think is one of the appeals about it is that you can learn a lot from it, and you are seeing right inside the process of it. And it leads me on to thinking, as someone who is still experimenting yourself and playing around with new sounds, do you have any advice for someone who might have never even stepped into this stuff but have always wanted to?
Oh, definitely, yeah. First of all, have a go. It's if you want to try and make music for one of these retro systems, have a go at doing it. You can find me on Twitch, or you can find me on Twitter, both at Richmond Mike, and drop us a line. I can guide you for pretty much any of the systems that I've worked with on what software you need to use. I'm quite happy to do streams to get people up to speed. I've done some SID ones. So on YouTube, you'd say I've done a kind of a goat tracker starting thing. And if you follow me on the stream and want to know what I'm doing, ask me what I'm doing. I'm more than happy to explain the rationale, because I tend to kind of get into this kind of rhythm and start tapping numbers in and stuff. But I'm always happy to explain what it is that I'm doing and try and get people on board, because there's a lot of really talented musicians out there that would like to work with chip sounds. The only thing that's stopping them from doing it is that you've got to kind of be able to program in these arcane 1980s machine languages to understand how the chips are working. And I don't think that needs to be a barrier. There's plenty of tools that either hide that from you completely or mostly hide that from you. The way that I learned how to do the Spectrum is I just ripped apart other people's tunes with the tool. I'm using a tool called Vortex Tracker currently for those. I had a look at how they made their instruments. They started to develop it from that. I did the same thing with SID, although SID's a little bit of a steeper learning curve because of the complexity of the chip. But the AY chip's actually dead simple because it doesn't do anything other than make square waves. But that's the beauty of it for me, is that you've got this thing that makes square waves. And my favourite thing I worked on, actually, just as an aside, is the ZX Spectrum 48K. It's just got a beeper. It's just got a little like a doorbell inside it. And there were people back in the day, like Tim Follin, writing 3-channel sound drivers that were making melodic music come out of this buzzer, basically. And that's what got me into the Spectrum in the first place, was just the idea that you could somehow make music out of this buzzer with a little bit of clever programming and a little bit of insight. Just, it amazes me.
We played something, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, from Tim Follin, from the beeper, that I think it was Agent X in the Brain Drain Caper. Yeah, just unbelievable.
I mean, obviously, by today's standards, it sounds dreadful. It sounds like a horrible buzzy mess. But put that into the context of this machine that basically just made a buzzing noise, and suddenly you've got something that's recognisably a tune.
Yeah. No, great bass, full like drums and everything. It's really incredible.
And it's 1-bit audio. This buzzer either is on or it's off. So to be able to create that 1-bit audio with just a little 3.5 megahertz processor, absolutely astounding.
Well, it's obvious that you do have a passion and an ongoing interest in this stuff. So are there any other chip sounds or systems that you haven't dipped your toe into yet that you've got your eyes on for the future?
Yeah, well, I've been working recently on a thing called Pixel, which is a virtual console. So it's a bit like a Pico 8 people might have heard of. I've been working on a cyberpunk game on that, doing some sounds. And that's, again, it shares a lot of similarities with the kind of 8-bit systems with, limited waveforms and limited controls. That's been quite enjoyable. I might stream a bit of that in the future. The big system that I want to work on, but just have never had the opportunity, is the Mega Drive.
Right. And yeah, with the FM synthesis and everything.
Yeah, the interesting thing about the Mega Drive for me is, and I'll never try and do it. Although technically I could go and I could get the Defler Master Tracker and I could write some music on it. I'll never do it unless I have a project because I just never have the inclination to do it. But what fascinates me about that is that they stuck, I think it's an AY chip, I think, or it's something similar to that. But they stuck one of these kind of basic chips into the Mega Drive. And I believe that the only reason that it was there in the first place was because it had a full master system inside it for backwards compatibility.
You're right, that's exactly right.
This extra chip. It had the Z80 processor, which is purely for for emulating. And somehow or other, they managed to wire it up so that when you're running a native Mega Drive software on the 68000 processor, you could have this second chip running the sound. So you'd have the Z80 chip running the sound. It's basically got like a little ZX Spectrum sat inside it. And you can combine that with the PCM audio channels. And that's what I love about it, is that you've got this mixture of chip sound and of this kind of gritty 8-bit samples, which I just think sound fantastic. And I think it's dated so much better than stuff like the Amiga, where, I love the Amiga at the time, but Amiga mod music is really badly dated for me now.
It comes down to that sample rate, really, right?
Exactly, yeah. It just sounds like a bad facsimile of what you can do better now. Whereas with the Mega Drive, that crunchy samples against the 8-bit background sounds like chip music. So for me, it combines the best of both worlds, and that's what I love about it.
Yeah, it's always been a real favourite of mine. It's funny because I remember when I interviewed Rob Hubbard for about an hour, he spent a good 10, 15 minutes expressing his disappointment with certain chips and what he couldn't get out of them. But then when it came to the Mega Drive, he was like, yeah, I did enjoy that one, I have to be honest.
It's great. I mean, if you had something like a SID chip in there, it'd be amazing. If they'd have put a SID chip in the Amiga, as well as Polar, that would have been an unbeatable kind of machine, because that mixture of chip sound and samples is just it's just dated so well. It just sounds really, really cool, and it sounds like the stuff that you'd hear in a modern game.
Absolutely, yeah. And just to finish up this conversation, I was going to talk about the future, but I don't want to step on too many toes because of what you mentioned earlier on.
Oh, you step as many as you want.
Well, in that case, is there anything that you're working on in the future that you could talk about?
Yeah, I've got a few things coming up. I've been working on a game called Corrie Cool Brew for the Spectrum. I think we played that last week.
Yeah, we did, yeah.
That's a ZX Spectrum platform game that's coming out soonish, and that's my second ever piece of Spectrum music. After that, my first ever piece of Spectrum music, which is I've done a conversion of my game Vegetables Deluxe for Spectrum and Amiga, so they're coming out in the autumn, I think. I've got Shadows of Sergoth, which is a dungeon crawler for the Amiga. I've converted the Amstrad music onto the Amiga for that. There's Hired Sword just come out, and I think there's an Atari ST version in the future. And this Pixel cyberpunk game, which I don't think it's actually got a name yet, but it's kind of like Blade Runner, but in this really, really low-res sort of Game Boy sort of style, pixely graphics. Fantastic. And if you follow @HelpComputerZero on Twitter, it keeps posting updates of the graphics of that, and it's looking fantastic. So I'm really keen to do some. It's a really basic tool to use, but I want to try and do it justice with this tool that I've got. So that's all the stuff I think I've got on now. I'm sure that somebody will contact me and tell me that I'm working on something that I've forgotten about. But that's currently what I've got, and that's stuff that I've either in progress with, have already finished and sort of passed it on again, or not started yet. There's a mixture of all them in there.
There's always a lot of stuff going on with your stuff, Mike, but that Blade Runner stuff in particular really piques my interest, because that's my favourite movie of all time, so I will be checking that out.
Definitely check it out. Honestly, it looks like it's going to be absolutely fantastic. I don't know what the game play is going to be like or anything, but just the graphical style is just so damn cool.
It's reminded me though quickly before I let you go tonight, is that there's a track I've got by you queued up on the playlist tonight called Bitmap Soft Loader, and I'm not actually sure what this was composed for. So what's the background?
Right. Yeah. Well, I did the music for a game called Luna. No, I didn't. It was called Luma, Luma, on the C64 puzzle game, which is Shalom 50K, a guy called Simon. He did a game called Dot Cosmos on the 64, which is probably one of the best Commodore 64 games ever. It was released like last year. But he set himself a challenge for his birthday of doing a stream for charity. And so he sat down for 16 hours and wrote a game from start to finish, which is this game with all proceeds that came in via Twitch and so on, all going off to charity. And so I volunteered, because I've worked with him a couple of times before. I volunteered to do the music under the same kind of circumstances. But what I did is I let him get to a certain stage until he kind of knew what the game was going to be. He then gave me a brief. I split off into a separate stream, and a couple of people followed me on Twitch into that little stream. Spent 2 hours writing the music for the game, fed it back into him, and then he integrated it into the game again. So it all kind of worked out quite cool. That game then got a cassette release, a physical release on the Commodore 64 through Bitmap Soft. And they got back in touch with me and asked me to do a tune to play. You know, on the Commodore 64, you can have music playing while the game loads. Mm-hmm. And stuff like Ocean used to have a particular theme tune that played in all of their games. And it was just, you know, really kind of iconic music. So what I offered to do for Bitmap Soft is to do this loading tune. And I kind of said, you know, if you want to use it in any other games, knock yourselves out, guys. You can put it in anything else. So currently it's the loading tune for Luma. But potentially it might appear in other Bitmap Soft games in the future if they don't have their own loading tune that comes in with from the composer of that game. So that's what it's also. It sounds a little bit like the Luma music, but it's intended to be kind of a standalone piece.
Yeah, well, it's great stuff. More crisp waves from Mike Richmond, man. I think that's how Ollie's described it in the past, one of our regular viewers, or similar.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind of him.
No, we're always keen to play your stuff on this show, man. So whenever there's new stuff, don't hesitate to get in touch.
Well, I'll always say, like I say, I'm little more than an enthusiastic amateur, but I'm certainly a fan of the genre, and it's really good to have somebody like yourself who's prepared to put something back into the community and introduce us to all this stuff. Oh,
it's just always cool to talk about this stuff, man, and to know that this stuff is still alive and still going on, because as you know, I'm late to the game, and I'm just so glad that the scene isn't dead, the community is not dead. It's still alive.
It is.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I'll let you get on then, Mike, and thanks so much for that.
Thank you. It's been great talking to you again. I'm sorry if I'm whizzing on a little bit fast today, but I've not spoken to any humans for days and days, so...
No problem. No problem.
Gets all out.
I basically only talk to people on this show, so I know how you feel.
Best way.
All right then, Mike. Well, I'm sure we'll catch up again in the future, and bye for now.
Okay, take care of yourself. I'll see you soon.